Good afternoon, everybody. President Aires Barros, Professor Stork, Secretary General, Dame Helen, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's for me almost emotional to be here at the Academy of Sciences. This place was created, I think, in 1779 by Queen Mary I. And I had the pleasure with the President as Secretary General just to go around these walls, and really you feel very small because this is something very unique. And it's a true delight to me to be here among such distinguished Europeans, among the intellectuals who make up the European Union of ideas that Professor Stork just mentioned. A European Union that I'm sure Madame de Staël would have been interested to appraise at length at her famous salon. Where would we be today without women like her? No earthly power could restrain her intellect, not even Napoleon himself. Her sharp critiques, practiced wisdom, and eye for poetic reasoning were all well ahead of her time, preempting the works of Sir Walter Scott or even Lord Byron. In my eyes, Professor Dame Helen Wallace has forged a career that is equally ahead of her time, carving out the very foundations of European Union studies and providing the gold standard in an entirely new sphere of intellectual analysis. Her academic work is actually clutched tightly by students in countless countries on the way to their lectures in politics, economics, law, history, and public administration. And Dame Helen's work is equally as revered by politicians, policymakers, and public servants. Should you take a moment to search, actually, for the latest edition of Policy Making in the European Union, and I did, you will be frustrated to find that in the central library of the Commission, there's no copies. They are all in loan, and they're not there. So I actually had recently, very recently, the pleasure of having dinner with Dame Helen and many revered fellows of the Royal Academies of London. Their openness and readiness around the table, actually to reconcile, to reflect and to challenge, provide me, Dame Helen, with new considerations for my political priorities in the course of a single evening. Perhaps I have spent too much time among the ranks of politicians, but one never expects the humility with which such an invaluable, heartfelt advice can be delivered. Humility is a noble virtue that finds itself personified in you, Dame Helen, along with the charismatic combination of genius and total clarity of vision. Indeed, Madame de Staël once said, "Genius is essentially creative. It bears the stamp of the individuals who possesses it." I imagine the truly unique stamp, that rare genius, is what has made you so wonderfully persuasive and effective, Dame Helen. Effective in bringing your peers together to analyze European integration so intensely. Effective in influencing the very processes of European integration as a highly respected advisor. As a policymaker, I can only envy your profound understanding of the history and evolution of the European institutions. And I'm sure that we all agree. Dame Helen has rendered an invaluable service to Europe, educating its politicians, public servants, and even one of the prime ministers, because one was just a prime minister for, I think, just left, but in Finland, but at least 1+1, let's say, who serve this great continent. And her work is always constructively informing, without bias, the critics who rightfully keep us in check. From the very start of your academic work, Dame Helen, you understood European integration as an exceptional and complex phenomenon, as a political system that can be dissected in a multitude of ways, one of them being academic scrutiny. Your invaluable analysis of the European Union's achievements and shortcomings, of its functional substance and institutional methodology, has long held us in a mirror to a unique democratic project that is forever redefining herself. There is, of course, a great need to bring Europe closer to its citizens, a need for people to regain ownership of the European project once more, a need to reignite European confidence in this remarkable ongoing experiment in the collective governance of a multinational continent, unquote. A need for talent individuals actually to revive, and I quote, thoughtful and skillful deliberations on the process of European construction. Europe must beat in the hearts of every citizen. Citizens ignite by the power of their influence. Citizens heard by the institutions tasked with serving them. Citizens freely informed by both the political and academic communities. Among its 10 priorities, the new Commission has undertaken to make the EU more democratic. In my view, part of that undertaking will be to ensure that Europe's finest academics can be called upon to offer impartial advice. We cannot even begin to tackle democratic failures, violent radicalization, or rising intolerance and extremism without collective learning, wisdom, and foresight of the academic community. The academies have traditionally played an important role in many member states, gladly providing expert opinion to governments as necessary. And academies will certainly find themselves playing a more and more significant role at European level, as EU policymakers increasingly wish to base their proposals on the best possible evidence. As EU policy comes under more rigorous public scrutiny, and as EU policy reaches a new emerging sectors and technologies. I was therefore very pleased to learn of the understanding recently reached by 5 academy organizations at European level, including ALLEA, to join forces and coordinate scientific input to policy debates at the European level. As many of you will know, President Juncker has asked me to propose a new, ambitious scheme to provide the European Commission with independent scientific advice by this summer. It is my opinion that we, as politicians, can no longer afford to let knowledge pass by us. We cannot allow ourselves to make decisions in the dark when the path to illumination is so near at hand. It is luminaries like Madame de Staël, like Dame Helen, who give flight to new ideas, who elevate the public discourse and make it easier for every citizen to come to their own conclusions about the politics they wish to follow. Dame Helen, Ladies and gentlemen, I applaud ALLEA for valuing excellent work with this already prestigious prize for eminent scholars who contribute to the cultural and intellectual values of Europe and to the idea of European integration. I also wish to thank the Stephen Mercator for generously co-sponsoring the Madame de Staël Prize tonight. Dame Helen, put simply, you have helped us understanding the European Union. You have actually clearly demonstrated that education and the social sciences are as vital to the evolution of democracy as universal suffrage. For without better understanding of our democratic processes, what hope do we have for safeguarding and improving them? Rather than chill away at the cracks, Dame Helen has offered insight that has helped us to sculpt Europe, insight that inspires all to do better. Madame de Staël once said, "Sow good services, sweet remembrances will grow." Today is our opportunity to offer sweet remembrances, to pay tribute to a scholar that has spent her entire career sowing good services. Dame Helen, today we offer you our heartfelt gratitude, our sincere appreciation, and our profound admiration. If you look just there, I was reading something in Latin. It says, "Nisi utile est quod facimus, stulta est gloria." Over there. It means, actually, if what we do is not useful, then there is no purpose, there is no glory. Madam Helen, my dear friend, what you did in your life deserves glory, and that's why we are here tonight. So it's my great honor to award you with this ALLEA Madame de Staël Prize for Cultural Values, and thank you for everything you did. Thank you.
President Aris Barros, Carlos Moedas, Gunter Stock, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wonderful occasion for revisiting this beautiful city of Lisbon, where I haven't been for far too long. And it's a pleasure to be inside this very beautiful building with our colleagues from the Portuguese Academy of Sciences. As you might imagine, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by everything that's been said, and it's all been much, much too generous. I'm very honoured, deeply honoured, to receive a prize in the name of Germaine de Staël. She was quite a lady, manifestly a transnational European, of Swiss parentage, deeply immersed in the French Enlightenment, an intelligent woman connected to almost everyone you've heard of from the literary and political generations of her period across the countries of Europe. Networking, to use the modern term, was her thing. And she's left a remarkable trail of correspondence which provides hard evidence of just how closely she engaged with the movers and shakers across Europe of her generation. She excelled in 3 domains. She was a literary giant. She was immersed in the complex and conflictual politics of her period. And my goodness, those of you who know her biography will know, she had a quite remarkable social life as well. I can't imagine how she fitted all those activities into a single life while continually on the move between countries. Her exploits present quite some example to the modern-day European traveller faced with the tests of passport controls at this or that border. Her record of navigating contesting borders for herself, for her family, for her favoured friends and fellow travellers present quite an example. And those of you who are Swiss may know that she had a bunch of Swiss colleagues who came often with false papers and helped other people to escape from France back into Switzerland. It's hard to imagine anyone these days, let alone a woman, navigating Europe transnationally as she did in a period of European political ferment. My own life has been much less adventurous. I do regard myself as a transnational. I'm British, I'm European, and I have a regional identity from my county of Yorkshire. Multiple identities have always seemed to me self-evidently achievable and beneficial. As you've heard, I started out as a student of classics, ancient European studies, and then jumped across a couple of millennia to contemporary European studies and the European integration process. I was very fortunate to start my professional career in a period of dynamism and optimism about three dimensions of contemporary Europe. First, the integration process itself being built around the then European communities. Second, the projection of the European model and European values to the wider world. And third, the welcome, if delayed, engagement of my country, the United Kingdom, in the European integration process. Professionally, I was on a roll, and I was able to benefit from the boom in European studies in my country and elsewhere in Europe. Indeed, we academics had many opportunities to develop teaching programs for plurinational cohorts of students and to develop transnational research projects. I've former students, if you've heard, I lost a Prime Minister last weekend, involved in the world of practice as well as in the academic community across Europe. I have collaborators and very good friends across Europe, and thankfully in Central and Eastern Europe as well as the old Western Europe. Commissioner Moedas, I must pay tribute here to the role played by the European Commission in helping my generation to develop such vigorous trans-European connections and to establish a vibrant body of expertise on the social, political, economic and legal dimensions of the integration process. The old DG10, as those of us who go back will remember it, was instrumental in promoting the development of professional associations of European specialists, and these have gone from strength to strength. The British Association UACs, of which I was an early member, is world class. And of course the Directorate General of the Commission, responsible for research, has over the years supported much state-of-the-art research by scholars from the social sciences and humanities who've contributed to our understanding of the dynamics of integration. I'm an optimist by nature. Sadly, however, in recent times, it's become rather harder to remain optimistic as regards the three dimensions of contemporary Europe that have preoccupied me throughout my career. My first concern is the integration process itself here in Europe. In the years since the global financial crisis, European values and European practice have been tested to the limits and are still under test. The gap between the can-do okay Europeans and the can't-do well-enough Europeans is staring us in the face. You here in Portugal have been struggling to find your way through. Greece, one of the first countries that I got to know and love as a classicist, is still locked in deep trauma. The European Union was already marked by fissures between those inside the Eurozone and those outside, and it's now marked by deep fissures within the Eurozone as well. And I find quite heartbreaking to see that we face so much more diverse a scenario with different categories of European Union members with different levels of commitment. And this scenario runs counter to the core understanding of integration that I thought I was in the business of studying. The European values of solidarity and cohesion, so much propounded as European values, are increasingly hard to turn from the abstract to the concrete. The inequality between countries is disturbing enough in itself, but just as shocking is the evidence of growing inequality within countries, between the winners and losers in our societies. A pattern of inequality in which, alas, the European integration process is also a factor. Those same values, those same European values of solidarity and cohesion are thus vulnerable inside each of our countries as our societies and economies fall victim to the stresses of the contemporary world. And we can see the footprints of those divisions in the rise of protest movements and parties across Europe, many of them with an ugly anti-European and xenophobic character. And I'm sorry to sound gloomy, but I think we have to face this rather difficult picture. One conclusion that I draw from this situation is the absolute need for us to put our heads together in order better to understand these problems of inequality, their causes and their consequences. The research community needs to step up to the mark on this, and on a transnational basis, since our countries are so deeply interconnected. And Commissioner, here I look at you again, if I may. We do want your support in trying to take forward our better understanding of the problems of inequality. My second concern is Europe as a model for the world. I guess that most of us here wish to believe that we in Europe present a successful and effective model to the rest of the world by the examples of European best practice and by the values that we pursue in engaging with other countries and regions across the world. We have much to be proud of from our past record. Can we be quite so proud of our current performance? To be sure, Europe is now a much less important continent than it was, as we can observe from changing patterns of economic and political relations in the international system. So we have to work much harder to make a difference to what happens elsewhere in the world. This is a big subject. Let me just highlight 3 elements. The way we engage with non-European Union Europe, the way we interact with other troubled regions, and our responses to the tragedies in the Mediterranean Sea. Just a word on each of these. First, as regards non-EU Europe. I've always been adamant that the European Union should not monopolise or hijack the label of European. Germaine de Staël was both quintessentially European and Swiss. Her Europe included Russia and Ukraine. She wrote about the grain fields that she travelled across in Ukraine. We in the European Union have a lot of unfinished business as regards those non-EU parts of Europe, whether in the Western Balkans or in Russia, Belarus and Ukraine. The European Union in its various policies and actions does of course make important contributions to the development trajectories in these countries. But we need to do much better, as colleagues here from non-European Union Europe will attest. In its way, ALLEA plays a very important part here, because ALLEA is not bounded by European Union Europe. ALLEA represents the big Europe. Contacts at the human level among people from the different countries do have a part to play in anchoring positive transformation. And again, the example of Germaine de Staël and her colleagues shows us just how important a transnational intellectual community can be as a contribution to promoting shared values. Secondly, as regards other troubled regions, it's only with pain that we observe that there are too many failed or failing states, and in particular in the Middle East and in Africa. The old Cold War seems with hindsight awfully simple and clear, despite the dangers that it brought. It turns out that it was too easy in 1989 to believe that West European values had triumphed. Yes, thank goodness, we've recovered much of Central Europe as an integral part of the European family and within the European Union. One of my greatest pleasures as an academic has been the opportunity to teach and then collaborate with colleagues from Central and Eastern Europe. Those of us who were involved in that can take a great deal of pride in what together we achieved. But as we look beyond Europe, we can see just how tough the contest is between European and wider Western values that we promote and alternative worldviews in regions of conflict. At the British Academy, we see some of this from the front line through our overseas institutes in Amman, in East Jerusalem, in Nairobi, as we work with Turkish colleagues through the British Institute in Ankara, and as we support our colleagues in the British Society for Libyan Studies and in the British Institute for Persian Studies. We're waiting impatiently as a British Academy to be able to reopen our base in Tehran. Indeed, I hope we can expand our practice of science diplomacy, and I know that you, Commissioner, are very keen to take forward science diplomacy on a broader European level. Thirdly, as regards the tragedies in the Mediterranean Sea, we've seen appalling evidence this week and cumulatively over recent weeks and months of the price that is paid in human suffering by the attractive example of European values. On the one hand, our values and our societal practice of course make Europe a magnet for desperate people from troubled and unstable countries. We surely would not wish it otherwise. Of course we want Europe to be a beacon of aspiration. Yet on the other hand, we find it a real test to accept the consequences of our magnetism. So our moral values are indeed under test. I pay tribute to the decency of all those Italians who are dealing with the immediate consequences of the boat traffic, both in rescue work and in humanitarian work. I've lived in Italy, and I know from first hand the strength of Italian civil society. Spanish and Greek societies, because of their geography, are also in the front line, full of decent people wanting to help the troubled travellers. Those of us further away geographically, like my part of Northwest Europe, can be a bit more detached, alas. We Europeans need to do much better by way of burden sharing and contributions to stabilisation, if only we knew how to do that. And I have to say, I'm less than pleased with the way my own compatriots have responded to the Mediterranean Sea crisis. That brings me to my third concern, the engagement of the United Kingdom in the European process. As you've heard from Gunther Stock, I wrote my doctoral thesis on the accession negotiations between the United Kingdom and the then European communities in the early 1970s. I embarked on a career as a European specialist, able to follow the insertion of the United Kingdom into the European integration process. I researched and published on areas of European Union policy to which British practitioners made enormous and valuable contributions. The creation of the Regional Development Fund, including the concept of cohesion in the 1970s, the development of the Single European Parliament, the Single European Market, which was indeed one of Mrs. Thatcher's greatest contributions to the European House, and the early and definitive support of British governments for the EFTA and then the Eastern expansion of the European Union, a commitment driven by the belief that these other countries were defined by their attachments to shared European values. It was easy then to feel positive about both British policy and European Union achievements as part of the same story. However, as you will all know, the British political system has failed to find itself at ease with deep European engagement. Politicians have not carried the citizens with them. British membership of the European Union is fiercely contested, and our presence within the European family is at risk. Well, we'll see what happens in the British general election on the 7th of May. There are widely differing scenarios on offer, and I'll leave it at that for the moment, except to say that it's very tough and very frustrating to be a British European. By way of conclusion, my heartfelt thanks go to you, Professor Stock, to you, Commissioner Moedas, for your generous words, and to the jury that commended me for this prize. Nothing of what I have done across the years could have been done without the wide circle of colleagues across Europe with whom it's been my privilege to work, colleagues in the academic community and colleagues in the practitioner community. There was a young student from Portugal whom I first met on a summer school in Florence in 1981. He went on to become President of the European Commission. So you'll see I am indeed one of those who firmly believe in the importance of continuous connection and debate between the world of research and the world of practice. Thank you all very much.